Hello, and welcome to another edition of our recycling podcast, Recycle, Don't Be a Waster. Sometimes there's that old saying, two steps forward and one step back. And I think that saying springs to mind today when we're talking about, I suppose what we're talking about is recycling or environmental improvements that in some way feels like we're moving back to the past. I remember a long time ago at school learning about Fray Bentos and how Uruguay and Argentina and how their economies really grew back in the turn of the century, the last century, from exporting meat from the River Plate, basically due to canning of meat, and how canning was one of the high technology aspects of that era, where it led to global trade. Um, I think now we're proposing in this podcast we're going to cover how aluminium cans could be the packaging of the future. Which, look, I'll be honest, it seems very odd, seems old-fashioned, seems the opposite of what we often talk about. But sometimes things that are super simple get forgotten about or get misplaced. And what we're talking about today is should we replace all plastic bottles and as much plastic packaging as possible with aluminium? And I think we'll discuss that and give some of the reasons for it. The reason we bring this up is, I think if your head hasn't been buried in the sand for the last few years, you'll be aware about plastic pollution in the oceans. Microplastics, and almost every week you'll read an article that plastic is being found in X, Y, and Z. Plastic is found in salt on your table. Plastic is being found in the human blood. Plastic is being found in the human brain. Plastic is past the brain membrane. I think I've read all these stories. The average human consumes microplastics equivalent to a credit card per month. Can't remember if it's per month or per week, but I know it's a lot. And the reality is we do not know the full implications of this plastic consumption. The great benefits of plastic, its colors, its durability, the fact that it lasts pretty much forever, or as good as many human lifetimes will say, is its biggest negative, because when it goes into the ocean or to the environment, it doesn't go away. The best that happens is it breaks down, and we used to believe out of sight, out of mind. But when it breaks down into probably even more dangerous materials called microplastics, which lead to consumption by animals and different sea life, etc. So look, I think a lot of people are coming around to the idea that plastic reduction is much more important than recycling. And I think, not meaning to bore people, we've covered on this podcast many times the myriad problems with plastic recycling, such as the fact that it isn't an infinite loop, and the fact plastic has to be separated, the fact that it'll have to be cleaned, the fact that you have to add virgin plastic each time, and as a rule of thumb, no plastic can be recycled more than, let's say, 10 times. So it isn't an infinite cycle. So no matter what happens with a plastic bottle for a soft drink, sooner or later that will end up either in the environment or in landfill, and let's be honest, some of it's going to end up in the environment. So those are the negatives. I think we all know them. But can aluminium really be the solution? So look, aluminium has a huge number of benefits. It's durable, it's light, it's flexible, it is an appealing shape and form, and it doesn't what's the term I'm looking for? It's not like a neutral environment, so it doesn't corrode or cause contamination of the food or whatever it's stored. So look, I think we're all used to seeing certain drinks in cans, such as soft drinks, cans of Coke, etc., and beer cans are predominantly stored in aluminium. But for some reason, plastic water and some other, well, I suppose you can buy soft drinks in cans, but also in bottles. But predominantly drinking water is I don't think I've ever seen it in a can. It's always in water, and whether this is that you can see through it, etc., and it's more appealing to the customer, I am actually not sure. But there is a movement, and I think it's a good thing, that potentially we should phase out plastic completely and move to aluminium. One aspect I didn't touch on is, I think we're all aware that there are issues with BPA and different types of plastic, and the fact that I think it's gaining acceptance that it can have quite severe impacts on human health. There's grey areas here, and it hasn't really been passed into the mainstream, but there's quite significant evidence that Plastics and certain types of plastics can interrupt human hormones and health in general. And I think this is another good reason. So especially with drinking water, when we always hear about don't leave it in the sunlight, don't leave your drinking bottle sitting in direct sunlight, etc., because certain aspects of the plastic will leach into the water, which again is quite a scary concept. So aluminium it meets a lot of the same functionality. It's light, is easy produced, and it's a commonly accepted packaging method. And then it avoids a lot of the negatives of plastic. It doesn't break down into microplastics. It doesn't pollute the environment in any way in the same way. At the end of the day, look, if aluminium was thrown in the sea, the worst possible outcome, it would in theory just, corrode away to nothing over time. In the same way, I suppose, on a much larger scale, and it's iron, of course, but like the Titanic or ships like that, they just corrode away. And it doesn't create the same durability of a microplastic in the organism. So that is the plus side. And the other great plus side is the closed loop aspect of recycling aluminium. Aluminium fundamentally can be recycled over and over and over again. My reading of it is almost infinitely. I'm sure there's certain amounts that are lost during the recycling, but as good as infinite. So that's why it's referred to as a closed loop. You don't need to add new product each time. So there's significant benefits to it. It would significantly decrease the cost of decreased recycling costs. The cost of using recycled aluminium versus new aluminium, it's much cheaper, to the single percentage points, and it's readily accepted and acknowledged commercially viable recycling methodology. One of the big problems with plastic, of course, is that it often has to be subsidized, plastic recycling, because there is no real off-takers. With aluminium, it can be used in myriad, I think that's the second time I've used that word on this podcast today, but myriad, third time, recycling options or utilization options for aluminium, from industry to construction to whatever else. So it will be used. There's a ready market for it. It can be internationally traded. You don't need to subsidize it anywhere to the same extent. And so it's a much more viable, sustainable methodology. Companies, let's look at the negatives actually. There's always, every cloud has a silver lining, and the inverse is true also. Making aluminium in the first place does take huge amounts of energy. My reading of it was that smelting bauxite, which is the precursor element or precursor material that aluminium is made from, just in Australia, that utilizes circa 11% of all the electricity used in this country. So realistically, if you didn't smelt aluminium, you could probably meet all your greenhouse gas emission targets in one fell swoop. But when you think about it, are we saving electricity down the line from new production, and then the environmental benefits of it? And clearly you can capture a lot of that carbon at the source if you utilize a modern smelting plant. So look, everything has negatives, and of course you have to mine it, you have to ship it, you have to that bauxite to actually make the product. But there are significant benefits. So, will you see drinking water in cans in the future? I think you're already seeing it. Reading today, Dasani, I think that's a Coke-owned brand for bottled water in the United States, and Danone, which is I believe an Italian company. It's either Italian or French. They are currently trialing at least packaging of waters in very light aluminium cans where the aluminium is thinner. I think the alternative here is glass, and you could make the argument, of course, that reduction is, of course, or prevention is better than recycling. And in this instance, could you prevent? Do we need to be buying as many soft drinks and bottled waters in shops? Could you buy just filtered water, etc., bring it from home? Yes, of course you could. But realistically, in the current consumer market that we have, there will always be consumer drinks. So sometimes it's best to accept the realities of the situation. Can we reduce or package these things in much more environmentally sustainable methodologies? I think certainly we can. And I think, newer, lighter, thinner aluminium is probably the best way of doing it. You combine that with deposit retainer container deposit schemes, whereby you might get some money back for converting your can, and it's a much easier closed loop system. And then, of course, because aluminium is metallic, you can remove it quite easily from even general waste streams. If general waste streams started to be processed through MRFs, etc., MRFs, you could potentially remove even a large component of that packaging. So I think it's a very positive thing. I think I think, look, this is, you can look at things in a positive light or in the other light. And I think the way I'd say it is plastic is so negative, it's got so many negatives attached that it doesn't take much to be better. And aluminium certainly passes those thresholds, but also aluminium has a number of very, very positive material benefits that I think will make it a very useful material for the future. Look, I personally would love to see, I would even advocate for the banning of plastic bottle containers for water. I think, and soft drinks, I think perfectly well you can utilize aluminium in that instance, and you're saving a huge amount of the environmental and potentially the health benefits. Look, obviously consuming sugary beverages, if it's a Coca-Cola, etc., or a Pepsi, they're not going to be very good if you consume them in excess. But even with water, like we do now we're starting to believe, we're starting to see the literature that there are significant health benefits or negatives from plastic packaging. So, pardon me, I think it's a very positive development, and I think I fully support it. So we'll leave it there today. I'll be interested to see would people, do people prefer drinks in bottles or cans, and what or what their viewpoints are on this. And I'll say I look forward to seeing your comments, and otherwise we'll leave it there. So remember, recycle. Don't be a waster.